My guy Trey Wallace from Outkick. Good morning, buddy.
What's up, my brother? I like the bumper music.
Thank you, man. How you been?
I'm good, man. Just trying to navigate a little bit of NIL, a little bit of college football news, and then get on the road to Nashville and cover an SEC basketball tournament.
Well, let's talk about yesterday, those hearings. We just played one of the sound bites where Nick Saban went into depth of, the direction this is going and why is he still doing this. Just your big takeaway from him in particular and what you heard.
More so that this is becoming theater now, I think, in front of Congress. I think that we are getting to a point now, David, where congressmen and women will bring just about anybody up to speak about the subject, thinking that, and this is my opinion, thinking that something's going to get done in the next 2 months before everything is going to be focused on the election. And that's why I have a hard time with this going in front of Congress anytime we can and speaking about this, because, I've spoken to a lot of administrators. I've spoken to a lot of congressmen and women. They got a lot more stuff going on right now compared to whether or not college athletes should be paid and how they should be paid. But getting to the Nick Saban comments, this is nothing that he hasn't said in the last 2 months in exit interviews. I think that the one thing that probably stood out was Miss Terry's comments. Why are we doing this? College athletics has changed in general, and we are getting to a point now where we have to figure out a way who's going to be the one that governs this. Is this going to be the SEC? It's going to be the SEC and the Big Ten combined. Tony Petitti, Greg Sankey. Is the NCAA going to stick around and be like, okay, we'll be some kind of governing arm when it comes to how we're going to pay players, or, okay, whatever you guys need, let us know because we're still around type of deal. I think overall, we have gotten to a point now, this spring portal period is going to be pretty mad. When you look at the new NIL regulations that are technically in place now because of the injunction filed by a judge in East Tennessee, I think that you're going to see a lot more deals kind of being played out in the public when it comes to NIL. I don't have a problem with what Nick Saban is discussing, because this has been a problem now for 4 years since NIL has been introduced. There was never any guardrails put around this. So it was always going to be pay for play. I know you're going to have your star players. You remember that first kind of year, or the second year, it was like Jordan Addison went to USC and he signed up with United Airlines and whatnot. Those type of deals are going to take place in the NIL spectrum. I think what they're getting at now and how this would play out, David, is you go to athletic departments taking care of all payments, revenue sharing pertaining to college athletics in these players. And whether that means a third string offensive lineman is going to get $45,000 a year, and that's how they're going to do it across the board. And then you can go make your money outside when it comes to NIL and sponsorships and how that part plays out. Okay, if that's how they want to do it, that's how they want to do it. But I think when it comes to, you're going to have lawsuits involved in this. You're going to have to figure out who's going to govern this part of this. And when Nick Saban, look, he's still a face of college football. But when he comes out and when he talks about, you remember a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, well, it really wasn't why I got out of the game. And then yesterday comes out, well, this played a really big factor in why I did retire from football. It's like, okay, well, which one is it? And I think we are at a point now where if they don't reel this thing in, and another thing too is they pretty much bashed collective yesterday in a way. If you listened closely, they bashed collectives and said, we want to get away from this. And for the public realizing, okay, these collectives have been coming to you for 4 years now. If you're a donor, if you're a season ticket holder, if you're somebody associated with a program, the collectives have been coming and asking for money. And that's not a bad thing. The problem here lies in the university side of this, where the university's like, well, wait a minute. These big donors are giving money to the collective, but they've decided to stop giving money to the university when it comes to facilities, when it comes to upgrading the football department, a stadium. That's where you're starting to see the fight now. You're starting to see the fight now between collectives and the athletic departments. And that's a reason why also we have gotten to this point of how do we control this and how can we bring this in-house. And I just think Nick Saban went up there yesterday. God bless him. But I think he went up there yesterday and was kind of a martyr. It's like, okay, let me lay all this down. And a lot of people wanted to say, okay, well, he's doing it for the good of college football. He could be doing anything today. He could be playing golf or hanging out at his new house. It's like, he's already had this on the schedule. Like it wasn't anything new. I understand what Greg Byrne was talking about with an athletic department deficit. Okay, that's fine. But when your program's bringing in, over $250 million a year, that's the balance with Title IX. When it comes to he talked about eliminating sports. Oh, we're going to have to eliminate sports because we're at a deficit. Let me tell you something. Every college university that is big enough out there with a football program is running at a deficit for your track and field, your rowing, your women's softball, even your college baseball. You could sell out every single game there in College Station, but you're still having to pay for travel and whatnot and food and whatnot and scholarships and athletes. So you're always running at a deficit. So I didn't like that part where, to me, it was a scare tactic more than anything that it was a conversation on how do we fix it.
Trey, explain this to me like I'm 3, because the lack of guardrails, I get it initially, but you've already said it's been 3.5 years. Like, what?
Right.
If my kids continue to make mistakes, I change rules and I put guardrails there, and then I kind of fix it as I go. Like, all right, now this is the new parameters. There's been zero adjustment, and I don't understand why it takes a long time for just some minor adjustments.
Because the NCAA is sick and tired of getting taken to court over every single thing that they do. So you don't have Greg Sankey, and I'll just use Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti as the guys because of their alliance. You don't have conferences coming out and laying out guardrails when it comes to NIL. So when that's the case, I mean, look at what happened a couple months ago. Multiple players can transfer now. You got multiple transfers now. So you can go from one school in the fall, next school in the spring, you're good to go. They decided to let that through because they don't want to fight this in court. So the NCAA has gotten to a point where, man, we just don't feel like dealing with this anymore. So you guys kind of figure out which way this thing is going to go. And when you add that judge in East Tennessee, and I was in that courtroom when the NCAA was battling Tennessee and Virginia over this injunction, when you had him grant the injunction that allowed NILs to sit here and talk about figures with these players, which that's how America works, by the way. You want to get a player, that player wants to know how much he's going to make when he gets there. He don't want to know after. He don't know what a ballpark percentage is. He wants to know what he can make. I think the NCAA has thrown their hands up, but they're also sitting off to the side and being like, okay, well, if y'all come up with something, we can still govern this part of it. You just give us the rules and let us kind of take over. Because I think the Congress situation and the government, I think that's a little far stretched right now because of what I said earlier. There's so much other stuff going on in the country. They don't feel like dealing. You can throw up there Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, whoever you want. God bless them. But you know what? At the end of the day, they work for the constituents. And do their constituents really, really care about how much an athlete's getting paid and how they're going to govern it? That's why I think it's going to take a minute before we get something involved with Congress. So you asked about guardrails. There it is. They are all trying to figure out at the same time, how do they handle this situation with there's no rules right now, technically. It's weird, man.
Let's talk about the health of the game in all games, right? So there was a report out, and there was I think a couple of mentions of a particular player, but somebody saying they're going to miss a game unless NIL was ponied up before a game. And NCAA tournaments coming up, and there's transfers potentially that could impact the way the tournament's going to go. The health of the game. Are there going to be, and I think there will be, fans are like, you know what? This ain't for me anymore, because I remember I could watch a program and see a guy grow over 2 or 3 years. I don't know if I'm going to have him next semester.
It's funny you say that. I got a piece coming out in about 20 minutes, and it's pretty much going at college football officials for trying to scare the fans out of enjoying the football game. You can't tell me there's not going to be 102,000 people show up in College Station on a Saturday for a football game. You can't tell me 100,000 people aren't going to show up in Neyland Stadium, another 20,000 outside the tailgate. When we really break this down, it's still college football, man. I know it's heading towards an NFL model, and I understand that when it comes to paying these players. But here's what a lot of people forget. And it, I don't know if it's being naive or just not wanting to admit that it was happening. Breaking news. These players were getting paid a lot of money before NIL was introduced. So if you're complaining now, why weren't you complaining 10 years ago when these kids were getting $250,000 to attend the school from a bag man or a booster or the $500 handshakes after the football game? Why is it? It's a big deal now because it's public. And when it's public, it freaks people out. They're like, yeah, even the coaches. Coaches don't want to talk about this. This stuff was handled behind the scenes in the dark rooms and alleys of hotel parking lots. They do not want to be talking about this to the media and letting the fans in on the big old secret. Well, the big old secret's out now. You're paying players, and you've been doing it for 40 years. This is nothing new. So I think when you look at it from a fan aspect, and I've talked with a couple people about this, trying to gauge different fan bases. And at the end of the day, they just want to be able to show up and want to be able to root for their football team. I think, yes, you are going to have some fans that are like, you know what? This is a little much for me. Like, it feels like more towards a pro model. I don't know if I can cheer for these players, blah, blah, blah. They can say all that. But then I promise you, when Saturdays come around and their team's hitting the field and, you know, it's in College Station or Tuscaloosa or in Gainesville, you're still going to show up. And I think that's to a point where we got to yesterday, where I think you had a lot of folks trying to scare fans in a way. But as you'll see, they're not naive, David. They understand. And if you're smart enough college football fan, you know that your star quarterback was getting something before they arrived on campus or getting something when they were on campus. So I just think it's a double-edged sword. That's what I'm getting at. I think that you have to realize it's already been going on. This is just a public way that it's now happening. And really, nothing has changed in the game besides the transfers that are moving around, okay? And then probably the amount of money has changed and how much these players are getting. But at the end of the day, they're still getting paid the same way that the starting quarterback for, I don't know, the Florida Gators or the Texas Longhorns were getting paid 12 years ago. It's just in a different model and a different form. So if fans can come around to that, I think they'll be okay. But I do understand, and I totally respect the fans out there that are like, oh, man, this game is kind of moving on a little bit. It's getting in a weird territory. I don't know if I can be a part of it. So that part's not lost on me, but I would come back to them and say with that argument, and a damn thing changed in the last 40 years.
Trey, I got about 30 seconds to play with here. I just want to, you wrote recently about Mo Hassan there at Vanderbilt and mobsters coming at him. Can you kind of give us the 30, 40-second version of that story?
Yeah, Mo Hassan, former Vanderbilt quarterback, played in 7 games, said he was at a honky-tonk bar in Nashville while he was playing there, and the Italian mob, I guess a spokesperson for the Italian mob, came up and said, hey, man, we'll give you $300K to fix this football game. And by the way, just some assurance, you know that we're doing it. We do this in the SEC, and we're rigging SEC games as well. Look, I don't know if Mo was doing this for clout. A part of me says, yeah, it's real. Somebody came up to him and offered him $300,000. Would that surprise me? No. That's the way gambling's done nowadays. It is what it is. You're trying to flip quarterbacks. But at the end of the day, you don't talk about the mob, okay? Don't talk about the mob. That's on you. So whatever happens, God willing, he's okay. He did run his mouth first.
Trey, great stuff, man. We'll do it again, all right?
Good to see you.